Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daughters of Deborah Humble Abode. I am your host, Michelle Marie, and we are very excited to have you all join us. Today is our first show, and today is February 23rd of 2023. I would like to welcome my guest today, Mr. Dolo Olu and Miss Najee Abu. Today's topic is: were the Ten Commandments stolen from the 42 laws of Maya? I hope I said that right. Okay, anywho, so what we will do first, we're going to watch this video by a girl who goes by the name of Buku Pudu, which seems to be a TikTok video post. She's stating that the Ten Commandments were plagiarized from the Kemet religion or spiritualism, whatever. I don't know what they call it. Anywho, so let's let the video roll. Hold on to your seats.
If you're a Christian and you follow the 10 Commandments, do you even know where they come from? If you don't, I'll tell you. As I've always said, the Bible is a plagiarized document that was used to lure slaves into fear. Those which the Christians call the 10 Commandments were nothing but affirmations from the 42 laws of ancient African goddess from Kemet called Maat. What the thieves did was they took Maat's affirmations, personal affirmations that started with I have not, and plagiarized them and turned them into you shall not. And out of 42 laws, they chose only 10. As a Christian, ask yourself why 10 instead of 42. The Bible contains truth, yes, but is it the whole truth? No, it is just droplets of truths that were taken from different communities and plagiarized into one in order to control people.
Okay, Mr. Ulu, what do you think about that video? Give us your expertise, please.
The 42 precepts of Ma'at are a list of principles named after an ancient Egyptian goddess of truth, justice, and order. The precepts of Ma'at are found in inscriptions in tombs and on some papyrus records. Some critics of the Bible claim that the 10 Commandments were not original with Moses or with Moses' God, but were plagiarized from the 42 precepts of Ma'at. Neither logic nor history supports this claim. According to Egyptian religion, a dead person's soul is weighed against a feather on the scale of Ma'at. Only those whose hearts are free from evil are spared from judgment. As a way of proclaiming his purity, the dead person declares the 42 principles of Ma'at, each to a different subdeity. These principles are not laws in any sense, they are simply declarations that the person has avoided certain behaviors. Each is phrased as a negative, for example, I have not swindled, I have not taken food from a child, or I have not made anyone cry. Of course, there are similarities between some of the principles of Ma'at and the 10 Commandments. Any culture's moral code will overlap other moral codes to some extent. For instance, the Egyptian statements, I have not told lies, and I have not committed adultery, correspond with 2 of the 10 Commandments. However, this similarity, by itself, is not evidence that one inspired the other. With a list as long as the 42 precepts of Ma'at, there are bound to be parallels with other moral systems. The 42 precepts of Ma'at do not seem to have enjoyed widespread distribution in ancient Egypt. Other than their presence on the walls of several tombs, they appear in 1 or 2 written Egyptian works, but there is almost no historical documentation about how the ideas were used. Different lists in different places have different declarations, so there's no official list of Ma'at's principles. Further, in contrast to the precept of Ma'at, the 10 Commandments are phrased as explicit rules, not suggestions. There is nothing optional about the 10 Commandments. Instead, they are very specific, you will not and you will. There are no archaeological or cultural reasons to think that the principles of Ma'at were adapted into the law of Moses. Any suggestion that they were is pure speculation. The most common argument connecting the Mosaic law and the precept of Ma'at relies on the fact that Ma'at worship predates Hebrew culture. Added to this is the fact that Moses was raised in Egypt. Therefore, the theory goes, Moses simply took what he had learned in Egypt and made up his own set of rules for the people he was leading. This reasoning suffers from a basic logical error known as post hoc ergo propter hoc, meaning, after this, therefore because of this. That is, it's illogical to claim that, given two pieces of literature, the latter must have been created from the former. What's more likely, and more supported by the evidence, is that much of Moses' writing was meant to counter Egyptian spiritual ideas, not to emulate them. It's not surprising that a long list of moral precepts such as found in the precept of Moat would agree with some of God's essential moral rules for mankind. In fact, an oft-repeated theme of Scripture is that people have a conscience, a witness to the presence of the law of God written on their hearts. See Romans 2 verses 14 to 15. Romans 1 verses 18 to 22 says that all people have enough evidence in nature and in their own hearts to respond to God, even though they choose not to. As the world drifts away from God and attempts to make its own moral standards, it's not surprising to see echoes of God's original, natural morality. The supposed link between the 42 precepts of Moat and the 10 Commandments is not often claimed by actual historians. Connections between the two lists are tenuous, forced, and ultimately irrelevant to the question of whether Moses brought down from Sinai an actual message from God.
So, Miss Najee, you're looking wonderful, by the way. How do you feel about what Buku Pudu is stating in her video?
With so many theories of Christianity being nothing more than plagiarism of Kemet and its practices, it is prominent to debunk what is currently spreading as wildfire. One of those misconceptions is the belief that the 10 Commandments were stolen from the 2000-year predated 42 Laws of Moat, which has no official list. Of course, there are limited similarities between the two, however, there are also distinct differences. For background information, Moat is an ancient Egyptian goddess of truth, justice, and order that is found in inscriptions of tombs and on some papyrus records. According to Egyptian religion, a deceased person's soul was weighed against a feather and judged by these principles to determine whose souls were spared from judgment. The 42 laws are in fact not actual laws, but rather declarations that are stated after death, hence why they all begin with "I have not." Although, you may notice that they are sometimes phrased differently beginning with "thou shalt not," to display biblical form and force bias. Whereas the 42 precepts are a list of negative things you should not do and confessed after death, the 10 Commandments are negative and positive statements that are kept before death. Oftentimes, we view whichever happens first as what is most authentic. Unfortunately, that is a common fallacy. Simply because an event happens after this does not equate to it happening because of this. It is stated that Moses' rearing in Egypt caused him to have plagiarized what he was taught. However, Moses' purpose was to oppose much of what the Egyptian culture believed, not duplicate it. For example, the 10 Commandments states that, "You shall have no other gods before me." It is impossible for this to have been stolen from Egypt simply because Egyptians worshipped multiple gods. "You shall make no idols." Egyptians did not have one belief system. They were believers of many gods. Therefore, this could not have possibly been of their negative confessions. "You shall not take the name of the Lord, your God, in vain." There was no specific name that was enforced by which their gods must be referred to. "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy." They did not have a day that was set apart to rest. "Honor your mother and father." This is not mentioned in the 42 declarations. It is also argued that the law existed before the 10 Commandments. Taking that into account, that would in return predate the 42 negative confessions. In multiple earlier scriptures throughout the Old Testament, there are accounts of people keeping the commandments. Supporting examples of this argument would be Adam and Eve, Genesis 3 verses 6 to 17, Cain, Genesis 4 verses 9 to 12, Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 13 verse 13, etc., all being punished for sinning. These examples are all documented before the establishing of the 10 Commandments in the Bible. Therefore, there would have to have been a standard for living in motion for sin to be considered such. Predating the papyrus of Oni, where the 42 confessions were derived, the Epure papyrus is said to date back 2 years earlier. Found incomplete and in poor condition, the Epure Perus is argued to be a recollection of the Exodus and biblical accounts. If this is true, that would deaden the complete argument of the 10 Commandments being taken from Egyptology. There is much left to the imagination and perception. However, logic and history both defeat the theory that the 10 Commandments were stolen from the 42 laws of Moat. With there being 42 declarations, there is bound to be parallels found with the 10 Commandments. It does not necessarily mean one was taken from the other. It simply means that there were similar codes of conduct that overlapped different times and cultures.
Okay, that is a wrap for tonight. Thanks, Mr. Ulu and Miss Abu, for all your input and for being here on the platform. Thanks to all of you guys who are out there watching. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I want to give a special thanks to www.gotquestions.org and also to Conscious and Christian. God bless, bless God, and good night. Shalom.